OpenAI and its battle with DeepSeek R1 has been hilarious. I think it's just so dang funny that they actually believe they have a case here, that they're actually saying how bad it is. They're like,
excuse me, we have a terms of service in which states, might I add you, that distillation for commercial uses, no thank you. That's illegal. That should be absolutely illegal. Terrible, terrible.
and then you sit there and you realize and you go, well, wait a second. Didn't you train on a bunch of GPL licensed code? Didn't you just scour GitHub, probably breaking hundreds of different licenses? I don't see you open source. I don't see you doing any of that. Wait a second. Didn't you take a whole bunch of images that were likely not really available with the licensing? Weird. Didn't you also take from Twitter, which Twitter does say that your posts are available for Twitter? I don't remember Twitter saying anything that your posts are available for other third-party services for them to be able to train and take every piece of data and be able to use it to build their own stuff to be able to, create money. So it's kind of weird that you, the person who has broken TOS and licenses consistently, feels that you're being cheated by having your license broken. It almost feels like we don't even have a word in English that describes the hilariousness of this situation. This might actually be the most perfect description of OpenAI I have ever seen in my entire lifetime. It is actually pretty awful what they're doing. All right, let's see. Hold on. Oh, I did not see this. Okay, hold on. Let's just read this because I don't quite understand the copyright part, so let's just look at the copyright. Today, the U.S. Copyright Office is releasing part 2 of its report on the legal and policy around issues related to copyright and artificial intelligence. Honestly, I do not believe that there's a single person probably inside the U.S. Copyright Office that has any idea what the hell they're talking about, and they have absolutely no technical depth, so I am completely convinced that they'll be either cronyism, some sort of corruption being paid behind the back to wield government power to allow AIs to continue to operate, or they literally just have no idea what's happening. So when I see the government be like, well, we're going to take care of it, I'm just like, yeah, okay. This part of the report addresses the copyrightability of outputs created using generative AI. Okay, so this is on the output. Okay, hold on. The office affirms that the existing principles of copyright law are flexible enough to apply to the new technology as they have applied to technology innovations in the past. It concludes that the outputs of generative AI can be protected by copyright only where a human author has determined sufficient expressive elements. So let me get this straight. I'm just trying to understand this. Generative AI can take and break copyright law, then other people can use it to generate material in which they can copyright? I'm not a lawyer. Okay, I'm not a lawyer, but I would just like to state that I don't get this at all. Okay, like I consider myself fairly adept at the old linear logic, like A goes to B and B goes to C and C goes to D. Like, I feel like that's kind of my bread and butter, the thing that I really accelerate at. And when I look at that, I don't even get it. I'm not even sure how you got from A to B at all. Like, oh, yeah, that stolen stuff. Yeah, the stuff you steal, right afterwards, you could be like, hey, that's mine. It's actually the meme of the person being handed a ball and going, I created this. Yeah. What? Okay, well, I guess no one owns anything anymore, and we're all going to get sued, and we're also all not going to get sued. Okay, well, hey, that seems pretty neat, right? Like, here's this thing that happens. It happens all the time on the internet. Somebody is considered, like, some company or some individual is considered like an expert in a thing. And they have certain behavior that you look at and you're like, okay, this is what they do. But when they hypocritically then point at another person for doing the exact same thing that they're doing, it like destroys their reputation. People just absolutely hate it with a passion, right? And so it's like OpenAI, like they actually just must stop talking about. They must actually 100% have to be like, oh yeah, that's totally cool. They distilled us. Yeah, that's fine. By the way, one last thing about all of this. I want you to know something very, very important. I know people are seeing all these DeepSeek stuff and saying how amazing it is and how they can't believe that everything's over and actually, everything's going to be way cheaper and actually AIs are going to take their jobs and all that fun stuff. I do want you to realize something extremely important with R1. Remember, there is a model that exists that OpenAI has produced that has cost the billions. R1 obviously took a nice little spigot, put it in there, and just dripped out all those good little learnings Yum, 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 and created a more efficient inference model, just sucking OpenAI or clean, sucking them dry, and now it can do pretty good. And they probably are lying. Like, let's just be real. They're probably lying, but they probably spent in the millions. Maybe they spent 1 billion, right? They're probably, I just assume they're lying at 5.5 million, okay? Can we just all agree that that's probably a lie? But it's probably significantly cheaper than anything that OpenAI has done. But I want you to think about one important thing that I don't feel like people are saying, which is for R1 to be so good and for R1 to be able to produce a model this cheap, they had to draft off a model that costed a cajillion dollars. There is no such thing as a $5 million model because $5 million model would not have been able to exist without very expensive model. People are kind of missing that little logical jump there, which means there's no free lunch. Someone just literally saw lunch in a refrigerator and went, and just ate it as fast as possible. And they're like, what? Lunch is free today. What do you mean? Everybody gets yogurt, right? My name's Karen. What are you talking about? Like, yeah, there's actually some super cool stuff they did. I love the fact that R1 didn't use CUDA. They just raw dogged their own version of it because they're like, you know what? CUDA sucks. We can actually write our own better version of the exact same thing. And they actually did because they're actual like champs over there. Like, that's super awesome. Like, hey, good job, R1. Hey, R1, you actually did performance work and you performance optimized the one thing that matters for you, which is absolute perfection when it comes to doing that. Like, good job, you. Hey, way to do it. Just absolutely be a champion. But that doesn't mean that it was $5.5 million. That's like, you can't like relate the two things, right? It's like looking at our modern technology and be like, what are you talking about? It only costs like $1,500 to have a computer. And you're like, no, it doesn't cost $1,500 to have a computer. The computer you're holding on to is almost 100 years of research. In fact, one would argue that it's more than 100 years because the Mark was inspired by the analytical machine, which is our first computer. So it's literally like 150 years of trillions of dollars of research pouring into a single point. You can't just say that a computer today costs $1,500, right? It's the result of everything else. And so OpenAI was able to be in their position and spend all this money, and R1 was able to draft off of it. And I'm sure R1 also did a bunch of other things that are super cool, that made it super efficient, yeah, we get it. We're all on that team. We're all on the team. They did some good stuff. But it's kind of ridiculous to think that this is the end of AI and no one's going to need to spend any more money because, boom, we've already done it. It's 5.5 million. Okay, hey, that's it. We're over with. From here on out, models are easy to train. You just simply need access to that multi-$100 billion model, and once you have access to that, it's like that easy. Boom. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. This might be the greatest take of all time. Oh, did someone take your hard work and use it to train a model to mimic your expertise without compensation? I feel like there needed to be a W somewhere in here that's missing. Oh, compensation. By the way, it is like they're going pretty deep on the evidence. By the way, if you haven't seen the evidence that some of them are using, it's because when you ask R1 who it is, it says, I'm ChatGPT. But even ChatGPT gets it wrong who ChatGPT is, right? When you ask any of them to who they are, they'll get versions wrong and everything. That's because there's kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy going on right now, where as more versions of that joke come out, the more likely that is the answer that is expected. Remember, this is next token prediction. Okay, that's what an LLM does, is it attempts to predict from the input what the most likely output is. Are we shocked? Right? No, we're not shocked. It should just do that. That's exactly what it does.